Welcome to RSAC Conference 2025. We're back recording live from the Cybersecurity studio in Broadcast Alley at Moscone West. I'm your host, Mandy Logan, and joining me for this interview is Karl Bergh, Chief Marketing Officer at Illumio. Welcome, Karl.
Thanks, Mandy. Great to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. And actually, right before we began, you mentioned something about a submarine.
Yes.
Can you go into that just
Yes.
real
So
quickly?
the team did a great job, by the way. In the Bay, there's a U.S. submarine. And so one of the things that we wanted to get across in our value proposition, and a little bit for your audience about Illumio, originally the micro-segmentation or network segmentation company. And so we want to get that across with an analogy. And one of the analogies that we found helpful is the submarine. So the idea of the submarine is that the way that submarine is structured is it's broken up into compartments or segments. And so if there's a breach at any part of the submarine, the water will only be contained in that particular segment. And so as a result, it won't sink. And it's the same thing with segmentation of your network or micro-segmentation of your network. If a bad actor gets in, which inevitably they do, then you contain the problem by basically keeping them to a certain part of the network. So we thought that was a useful, fun, appropriate analogy to get that message across.
It's fantastic, and I feel like that brings together really becoming the cyber equivalent of an incredibly capable Titanic.
Yes.
So avoiding
To avoid
everything.
it, yes, yeah. And disasters, I mean, that is part of our mission is to have a future without cyber disasters. And so the message that we're bringing to the market and a little bit of context and maybe some data
Yes,
behind
please.
kind of, how we're seeing the market. So the cybersecurity industry, for the last few decades has really focused on keeping bad guys out of the network, trying to stop breaches. And that's an admirable task and obviously something we need to continue to do. And we're spending hundreds of billions. I think the latest this year is maybe 350 billion on cyber security, right?
Okay.
No surprise given the size of RSAC, right? You can see how many vendors are here. The challenge is, in spite of that spend, and it's increasing every year, the cost of cybercrime is continuing to grow every year. In fact, Forrester, I think, estimates $12 trillion the cost of cybercrime in 2025. And so we're spending more money, and the problem is getting worse. So something's wrong. And the thing that's wrong is that whereas trying to stop bad guys is absolutely necessary, it's not sufficient. We've got to, once they breach, once they get in, we've got to contain the problem. And so we're about breach containment. And we can talk more about how we do that and why that's important and kind of the steps to take. But that's really the core message. We want to get to the market. We've got to focus on containing the problem, on stopping the spread, not just trying to stop the attack.
Excellent. And now let's pretend we did not just have those wonderful sentences.
Yes.
And I want to ask a question.
Yes.
So, when you're discussing a post-breach world,
Yes.
for people who are not familiar with
Yeah.
Illumio,
Yeah.
are you discussing that, the events immediately after something has actually been breached, or are you going so grand as to say no breaches will ever happen again?
No, it's the former. So
Okay.
it is. We believe, in fact, breaches are inevitable,
Yes.
and like the data proves that. As I said, cost of cybercrime keeps going up. We ran a survey and a report a couple of years ago. Refresh it. Like breaches are happening like every few seconds, and it makes sense. I mean, these cyber
Yeah.
criminals are getting more and more sophisticated. And as I said to my team, and I've said this, it's kind of ironic in the world of artificial intelligence. The weak link is real intelligence, is human intelligence, because most hackers get in through social engineering.
Absolutely.
That's how they land. So in other words, humans are the weak link. So it doesn't matter how sophisticated your AI tools are, you're never gonna, unless you implant an Elon Musk chip in your brain, maybe you can get as smart as a computer. But the human is the weak link. And therefore, breaches will happen. And it's, more and more common because of the complexity of the infrastructure. So
Well, and not just that, but also the rise of AI and being able to create such hyper-realistic
yeah,
phishing campaigns, the deep fakes,
deepfakes,
phishing.
absolutely, yeah. It's like impossible. Like, personally, I fell victim to it. Like last year, and I thought, I'll never do it. But it happened.
Right.
And so that's the reality that we're dealing with. When you say post-breach, you just got to assume that the breach has already happened. And so it's about what do you do after the breach has happened, and that's the focus on containment, on containing the problem before it becomes a disaster.
So, what more on that? Why do you believe that our security teams are struggling to keep up? Can you identify a couple of
So
things?
one of the things, and we'll talk a little bit about an underlying technology that we use and a number of other vendors like Wiz and SentinelOne use, is the graph, right? And the importance of the security graph. And so the the thing about the, the there is John Lambert, who's a distinguished engineer at the Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center, has a quote which says that defenders think in lists, attackers think in graphs. As long as that's true, attackers will win. In other words, we have like lists or alerts or things that we need to go through as defenders to try and figure out what's going on in the system. Attackers don't think that way. They think they want to find like a landing point, and then what's the sort of the network or the way that they can get to the valuable assets. Right? They're looking at the world in a very different way. Unless we change that paradigm, we're going to be stuck. And so what we have at the underlying our technology is the security graph. And the Illumio AI security, so, and we'll talk about the AI
Yes,
component
please.
in a minute,
Yeah.
but the AI security graph basically ingests all of your network flows. So
Okay.
this is kind of unique, is that a lot of the graphs out there are relationships, just relationships or uh, posture management
You mean between assets or between?
between assets,
Okay.
or relationships. But we actually ingest actual network flow.
Okay.
So the data that's flowing, the metadata of the data that's flowing, and we ingest that. That's like petabytes of data a day into our graph. And it allows you to understand the full network complexity of your hybrid cloud, because we go across multiple clouds and also
Okay.
your data center. And with that, you can identify attack patterns and paths that are otherwise impossible to, because it's like a multi-step process, and we can see the whole thing. And so the use of graphs, and we've just got a book that was published by Chase Cunningham that came out about he's Dr. Zero Trust. I don't know if you know Chase Cunningham. He's an influencer in the zero trust world.
Okay.
And he just published a book about the importance of thinking and defending using graphs. So I'll stop there for a minute. We could talk a little bit more about the AI component and how we
Yes.
leverage that. But that's, I think, the using graphs is an important part of how we change the game on the attackers.
Now let's go back to AI-enabled security graph. Do you
Yes.
mean that on your side you're actually just using assistive AI with your teams, or how else is it enabled
Yeah, how
through
is it?
security graph?
So, really, the way it's very practical. As we talked about off air before we started recording here, is that there's a lot of AI washing out there. Everything is AI, right? True. I mean, it's kind of cropping up everywhere, but where's it really valuable? Where it's really valuable is like taking a lot of the grunt work out, especially at scale. So, we have a very large customer that's got tens of millions of workloads across their cloud. And we just ingest that data and we use AI and ML to auto label all of those flows.
Okay.
And they're dynamic, right? It's changing all the time. So it would be impossible, even if you had an army of people, to like keep up with what's going on. But AI, through pattern matching, heuristics, prior data, best guesses, all of these things, can automatically label all of this. So it becomes intelligible. And then on top of that, you run, again, like you put in threat intelligence, you put in malicious IP data, right? You get all of this, and then you can start using AI to run heuristics or analysis across all of that data, and it identifies the problems for you that otherwise would just be impossible to identify as a human. So it's the auto labeling, right? It's the scale of it. It's the because it's constantly changing. It's very transient to be able to do all that in near real time, and then running analytics on these huge workloads of data and coming back with here are the top 3 problems that you've got in your environment.
So do you view that as simple automation for the security team?
Yeah, like it's basically, and as you know, one of the challenges of the SOC or the security team is they're just overwhelmed.
Yeah, absolutely.
They-
Inundated,
They,
yes.
they just don't know what to do, right? And so it's I think it really is. This is for me the power of AI and ML is just taking a lot of the workload off. In some cases, I said it allows us to do things that would be otherwise impossible.
Right.
But and in a lot of other cases, just automating, right, in an intelligent way, that so that the analysts can do their job because they're kind of struggling to keep up.
And what is the concept of connect the dots?
Yeah, so the connected dots is back to the graph.
It is, okay.
It is. It's basically you can see. I did this fun thing. Well, it kind of didn't work, but the intention was good at our sales kickoff to get the idea of the graph across to because we've had the graph technology in our product for like a decade,
Yes.
so it's not like new, but we're surfacing it now through this AI CDR, Illumio Insights, so cloud detection and response product which we launched, which really our customers came to us and asked and said, hey, you're sitting on all of this rich network data. We want to see it in basically in dashboards. And so what I did to the team was to kind of to connect the dots to get that idea across was I had them all at SKO. It was like 600 people, 700 people in the room, and I had them put an LED on their light, on their head, certain seats, and at their seat level, you look around, you just see these red lights, right? But then when you zoom back, we had a camera on the ceiling, look down, and it spelled out crap. Actually, it was like make out like crap. Unfortunately, like not everyone picked up the light, so it didn't quite work. But
Again,
the idea
human
was
error. We're going back to social engineering
yeah,
and human being a weak
so it didn't quite follow instructions. But the point is that so they couldn't see it, but when you like had a
Understand.
perspective,
Right.
you could connect those dots and see there was a problem.
Excellent. So having that, I think many of us think about the 20,000 foot view. Or I
Yes.
think a lot of us who tend toward IT and security, we have big picture thinking. We think top down no matter what.
Yeah.
So what excites you about being able to use the AI-enabled security graph even more, and what is something you've seen it help your customers with that you didn't intend?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, what we're seeing is because originally we worked with more of the blue team, like on the segmentation piece, where it's a kind of a segmentation is one of those things that if you do it, and it's really one of the pillars of the zero trust strategy. If you do segmentation right, you're going to be golden, right? As I said, you get breach or you get an attacker come in, they can't go anywhere. But it takes a lot of work to get there, and so we wanted to find a way to enable that to move faster. And so when we brought in the security graph, it allowed more teams outside of just the blue team. So the SOC came in, the threat hunters, the red team came in, and they were able to use all of this data because it's kind of real time. So you can see breaches in real time. You can also see potential attack paths or risks of attack paths. So essentially we found it kind of brought a lot of the teams together that weren't necessarily talking to each other around a kind of common view.
Wow. So going back to, it's funny, I had a conversation with my Pi AI agent the other day about what is the fundamental aspects for the most successful cybersecurity team.
Yes.
The number one that it brought up was still communication.
Yes.
So enabling that level of communication is it is what we all need. It is what us weak humans still require.
And we also, the thing is that what we find is like the graph is the powerful thing about a graph is that it mimics how humans think. We think in graphs. We don't even realize it. Like a map is a graph, right? Obviously, our social network is a graph. These are all graphs, part of our daily lives. We don't even realize that we operate and think with graphs. And so it's natural for us, for example, when there is a workload that is affected, we see it, right? You want to see, okay, what else is it attached to? So you're actually looking for the graph, that all the things it's connected to. And we show you visually, you can just zoom in and you can see everything that it's connected to, like physically connected to through the network. And so it really responds to like the natural way humans think and how they would solve for a problem or try and contain the damage.
What a masterful use of data. So,
Yeah.
Karl, thank you so much for being here
It's
with
been great.
us. Good.
Thank you, Mandy.
You're so very welcome. To find out more about Illumio, please visit securityweekly.com/Illumio RSAC. For all RSAC 2025 coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. Thank you again, Karl.
Thank you,
This has
Mandy.
been
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's great.
And please stick around. We'll be back right after this short break with more interviews live from RSAC Conference 2025.